As a young man, Samuel had dreamed of love, of a simple life where he could share meals with family, laugh without suspicion, and trust the smile on another's face. But as his businesses grew and his fortunes multiplied, those dreams withered. People came close only because of his bank account. Relatives turned into beggars who disappeared as soon as they got what they wanted. Friends became rivals. Women he dated dazzled him in the beginning but quickly revealed that their true affection was for his wallet. It wore him down until his heart hardened and he stopped believing anyone could truly care for him. Still, Samuel kept company. He had a girlfriend, a secretary, and a maid, 3 women who surrounded his daily life in different ways. Precious was his girlfriend, beautiful enough to silence a room when she entered, her long nails painted in bright colors, her handbags always the newest from overseas. She spoke with confidence, laughed loudly, and carried herself like the queen of the world. Samuel tolerated her vanity because she entertained him, but deep down he suspected that her love was shallow. Then there was Glory, his secretary, a woman who worked with precision. She was always early to meetings, always neat, always writing notes while his business partners spoke. He trusted her with documents and contracts, yet sometimes he caught a flicker in her eyes that told him she wanted more than a paycheck. The third was Esther, his maid. She was the opposite of the other 2, soft-spoken, always in simple gowns, her hair tied back, moving silently as she cleaned. She never asked for anything, never complained, never even looked him in the eye unless necessary. Samuel sometimes wondered what she thought of him, but she remained a mystery. One evening Samuel sat in his study with a glass of wine untouched on the table. Michael, his oldest friend and his lawyer, had come to discuss contracts but found Samuel lost in thought. Michael was one of the very few who had known him before wealth consumed his life, back when they were struggling to make ends meet. He asked Samuel what was troubling him. Samuel rubbed his forehead and admitted that he was tired of being surrounded by people whose smiles he could not trust. He confessed that he did not believe any of the women around him cared for him as a man. Michael tried to dismiss his worry, but Samuel shook his head firmly. He said he needed proof, something that would show him who was real and who was false. He explained his plan in a calm voice. He would give each woman a credit card with no spending limit. He would tell them it was a token of appreciation. He would watch quietly for 3 days to see how each of them chose to use it. Precious, Glory, Esther. 3 women, 3 paths, 3 revelations. Michael raised his eyebrows, warning him that he might not like what he discovered, but Samuel was determined. If none of them proved genuine, then at least his suspicions would be confirmed. If one of them surprised him, then perhaps his faith in love could be restored. The following morning Samuel summoned Precious first. She arrived in a short yellow dress with gold earrings that glittered under the light. She kissed him on the cheek and laughed at some joke on her phone before finally looking at him. Samuel handed her a sleek black card and said he wanted her to have it as a gift. Precious gasped loudly, her eyes wide. She asked if there was a limit. Samuel told her no. She hugged him so tightly that her perfume clung to his shirt. She squealed that he was the best man alive, promised to make him proud, and almost ran out the door with the card clutched in her hand. Samuel sat back watching her heels disappear, a dull heaviness already pressing his chest. Later that afternoon he called Glory into his office. She entered with her notepad and files, ready to discuss the schedule. Samuel waved away the papers and told her he wanted to appreciate her loyalty and dedication. He handed her the same kind of card. For a moment surprise flickered across her face, but she quickly masked it with professionalism. She asked if he was sure. He nodded. She smiled politely and said she would not disappoint him. She tucked the card into her folder as though it were just another document and left the office calmly. Samuel studied her as she walked away, wondering what kind of thoughts were already brewing behind her calm face. Finally, in the evening, he found Esther in the kitchen polishing a set of spoons. She looked startled when he entered and tried to stand aside respectfully. Samuel told her he wanted her to have something. He pressed the card into her palm. Esther frowned and looked at him with confusion. She asked why he would give something like that to a maid. Samuel told her she deserved it. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but eventually whispered her thanks. Her hands trembled as she tucked the card into her pocket, almost as if it were too heavy to carry. She went back to polishing as though she had not just been handed power beyond imagination. That night Samuel could not sleep. He walked through his mansion slowly, the sound of his own footsteps echoing in the empty halls. He looked at the chandeliers, the wide staircases, the paintings he had collected from across the world. They all looked like decorations in a cage. He poured himself another glass of wine but still did not drink. The 3 cards had left his hands, but in the days ahead they would return to him in the form of truth. He was excited, nervous, and afraid all at once. The next day he called Michael and told him the plan was underway. Michael promised to track the spending discreetly through the bank system and update him. Samuel agreed but asked him to keep it secret. He wanted to watch without interfering. Michael asked again if he was sure he wanted to go through with this. Samuel said yes. If love was real, then it would shine through this test. If it was not, then he would free himself from illusions forever. He sat by the window as the sun sank behind the hills, his thoughts dark and heavy. Somewhere in the city, Precious was already planning her spree. Somewhere else, Glory was calculating her moves. And Esther, quiet Esther, was probably staring at the card wondering if it was even real. Samuel leaned his head back against the chair and closed his eyes. The test had begun, and in 3 days his heart would either be broken completely or finally healed. Precious woke the next morning with excitement bubbling through her body like fire. She could hardly believe that Samuel had given her a credit card with no limit. She had dated wealthy men before, but none had trusted her with such a gift. As she lay in her king-sized bed, her eyes moved toward the purse on the table where the black card rested, shining slightly under the weak light that came through her curtains. She smiled and whispered to herself that her life was about to change. She wasted no time. By mid-morning she had called 2 of her friends and arranged a shopping trip. They squealed with delight when she told them she had access to Samuel's endless card. They dressed in their best clothes and drove with her to the most expensive mall in the city. As soon as they entered the first boutique, Precious walked past the mannequins and pointed to every display she liked. Designer gowns, high heels imported from Europe, handbags made of crocodile skin. She told the attendants to pack them all. When the cashier announced the bill, Precious slid the card across the counter with a flourish. The attendants gasped when the transaction went through instantly. Her friends clapped and cheered as though she had won a lottery. Precious walked out of the store with bags hanging from both arms, her smile wide. The spree continued. She bought a diamond necklace from a jeweler who usually reserved his pieces for politicians' wives. She bought an entire set of wigs, each costing more than what an average worker earned in a year. She even purchased perfume worth hundreds of thousands, insisting she needed every cent to match her moods. Everywhere she went, she flaunted the card and told anyone who asked that her man had given it to her because she was special. By evening she was exhausted but satisfied. Instead of returning home, she booked a luxury suite in a 5-star hotel, using the card to pay for the most expensive room. She invited more friends and ordered bottles of champagne. The rooms soon filled with music, dancing, and flashing lights from the cameras of their phones. Precious posed for pictures, holding up glasses, showing off the diamond necklace, flaunting the handbag spread across the bed. She uploaded the images to social media with captions praising her own beauty and hinting at her powerful connections. Within hours, her posts gathered thousands of likes and comments. People envied her, calling her the luckiest woman alive. Precious soaked in the attention, hardly noticing when new faces joined the party, men who came with her friends, strangers who smiled at her only because of the wealth she displayed. While Precious celebrated, Samuel sat in his study. Michael had sent him the first updates. Samuel read the reports silently, his face darkening with every purchase listed. He saw the names of luxury boutiques, jewelry stores, and hotels. He saw the numbers, each transaction higher than the last. He closed his eyes and felt the weight of confirmation pressing on him. Precious had not used the card for anything beyond herself. Not a gift for anyone else, not a thought of the needy, only indulgence and display. Still, Samuel told himself to wait. It was only the first day. Perhaps she would surprise him tomorrow. The second day, Precious woke up with a hangover, but the sight of the card on the table revived her energy. She called a travel agency and demanded a first-class ticket to Dubai, same-day departure. With the card in her hand, she breezed through the airport, dressed in designer clothes she had bought only yesterday. She filmed herself boarding the plane, uploaded the video with a caption about living the soft life, and leaned back in her seat with champagne in her hand. In Dubai, she checked into another luxury hotel and went straight to the malls. She bought more clothes, more shoes, and more jewelry. She attended a beach party hosted by an influencer she had only met online. Cameras captured her laughing with strangers, dancing in a swimsuit that sparkled with crystals, showing off her necklace again. At night, she shared pictures with captions about queens deserving the best. Samuel saw it all. Michael kept sending screenshots of her social media alongside the spending reports. Samuel stared at the images of Precious surrounded by strangers, smiling in the arms of men he had never seen. His chest tightened as he realized she had not called or messaged him once since receiving the card. To her, he had become invisible, only the silent source of her endless spending. On the third day, Precious pushed further. She organized a yacht party, renting the entire vessel with Samuel's card. She invited dozens of people, many of whom she barely knew. Expensive wine flowed, music boomed, and Precious stood at the center like a queen, her laughter echoing across the water. She posed for more pictures, kissed other men on the cheek for fun, and shouted that she was unstoppable. The guests cheered as though she were a celebrity. Back in his mansion, Samuel watched the updates with a cold expression. Michael sat across from him, uneasy. He asked Samuel if he wanted to end the test already. Samuel shook his head. He said he had to see it to the end. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the pain growing inside him. When the 3 days ended, Precious finally returned to the city. She walked into Samuel's mansion carrying bags and speaking excitedly about all she had seen. She kissed him on the cheek quickly and began showing him pictures on her phone. Samuel listened quietly, nodding. She never asked how he was, never asked if he had eaten, never mentioned him in any of the stories. Everything was about her. She laughed and said the card was the best thing that had ever happened to her. Samuel smiled faintly, but inside his heart sank. He realized that whatever connection he thought he had with her had been an illusion. That night when Precious left, Samuel remained in the study alone. He poured wine into a glass and stared at it. He remembered the way she had hugged him tightly the day he gave her the card. He remembered the way her eyes had sparkled when she asked if there was a limit. He realized now that it had not been love in her eyes, only greed. He lifted the glass slowly, then set it down without drinking. The truth was clear. Precious was in love with wealth, not with him. The mansion grew quiet again, the only sound the faint hum of the fountains outside. Samuel leaned back in his chair, his mind heavy. One woman had been tested, and she had failed. 2 remained. Glory and Esther. He whispered their names into the silence and wondered what their choices would reveal. The morning sun stretched across the wide windows of Samuel's mansion, pouring light onto the marble floor in a way that made the house look almost too beautiful for its emptiness. Samuel sat at the long dining table, a cup of tea cooling before him, but his mind was far away. Michael had sent him another discreet report, this time on Glory, the secretary who had worked at his company for nearly 5 years. Samuel trusted Michael's words as if they were scripture, but his heart ached more with every detail he read. Glory was not like Precious, who openly adored vanity. No, Glory was clever, subtle, and ambitious in a way that made Samuel both respect and fear her. She had been the one who managed his schedules, balanced his corporate chaos, and shielded him from vultures in business circles. She had the calm smile of a woman who knew how to survive in a room full of wolves. But the credit card test had stripped away her mask. Samuel had given her 3 days, and what she did with those days revealed more than 5 years of loyalty ever could. Glory had not wasted any time. The very day she received the black card, she booked herself into the presidential suite of the finest hotel in Lagos. She ordered champagne, though she barely drank, and invited a small circle of corporate associates. At first glance, it seemed like a harmless celebration, the kind of indulgence anyone would fall into with access to limitless wealth. But the names of the guests disturbed Samuel. Among them was Gideon, his longtime rival in the energy business, a man whose handshake was colder than stone. Gideon had always tried to find cracks in Samuel's empire, and now here he was, dining at Glory's table, laughing with the very woman Samuel thought had been loyal to him. Michael's report described in painful detail how Glory used the dinner not only to flaunt her sudden access to wealth but also to negotiate her future. She had spoken of new opportunities, of partnerships outside Samuel's shadow, hinting that she was ready to build her own empire. Samuel felt the weight of betrayal settle in his chest like a stone. Glory was not stealing directly, no, but she was investing her faith in Gideon, using the card as a key to doors Samuel had closed for years. The second day brought more revelations. Glory rented a private conference room at another luxury hotel and filled it with faces Samuel recognized from his business battles. Competitors he had fought to outbid on contracts. Rivals who had envied his rise. She used Samuel's resources to strengthen their connections, offering them lavish dinners and promising introductions. To Samuel, it was like watching a trusted soldier hand over maps of his fortress to the enemy. Glory's ambition was sharp, and though Samuel admired drive in his employees, this was different. This was betrayal dressed in elegance. She was not simply spending for pleasure like Precious. She was building an exit strategy, ensuring that if Samuel ever turned his back, she would not just survive but thrive without him. That cut deeper than any gold chain or designer dress could. On the third day, Glory visited a jewelry store. Not to buy for herself alone, though she did leave with a diamond necklace glittering like frost around her throat. She also purchased expensive watches and perfumes, gifts that Michael noted were delivered to key figures in Gideon's circle. Samuel could almost hear her reasoning. She was securing alliances, binding people to her with generosity funded by Samuel's wealth. It was clever, too clever, and for the first time in a long while Samuel felt the sting of genuine disappointment. He had thought of Glory as capable, dependable, maybe even trustworthy. But this test revealed she had only been waiting for the right chance to free herself from the position of secretary and step into the shoes of a queen in her own empire. The realization gnawed at Samuel, not because of the money, he had more than enough to lose, but because of the clarity it brought. Glory did not see him as a man worth following. She saw him as a ladder, and once she reached the top, she no longer cared if the ladder broke. Samuel left the report on the table and leaned back in his chair. His gaze wandered across the mansion's quiet halls. Precious had chosen luxury for herself. Glory had chosen power for herself. And Esther, though he had not yet read her full report, lingered in his mind like a soft whisper. He thought of her gentle voice as she greeted him each morning, her simple clothes, her calloused hands that scrubbed his floors without complaint. He could not imagine her sitting across from Gideon, laughing and negotiating. Yet he did not want to assume. That was why he created this test in the first place. He needed to see truth, no matter how painful. Later that afternoon, Michael arrived at the mansion. His suit was perfectly pressed as always, his glasses gleaming in the light. He carried a folder under his arm and greeted Samuel with a quiet nod. They had been friends for years, ever since Samuel first struck gold in the oil business and needed someone honest to handle his contracts. Michael placed the folder on the table, but Samuel raised a hand. "Not yet," he said. His voice carried exhaustion. "Tell me about Glory first. Not just the facts. Tell me what you saw." Michael hesitated. He was not a man of gossip, but Samuel's eyes urged him to speak. "Glory is ambitious," Michael said slowly. "She has always been. You know that." But with this card, her ambition became clearer. She sees herself not as a secretary but as someone who can stand on her own. And she is willing to use anyone's resources to get there. Even yours. Samuel closed his eyes. The words confirmed what he already knew but wished he could deny. "So she was never loyal," Samuel murmured. Michael adjusted his glasses. "Loyal, yes, but only as long as it served her. The moment she saw an open door, she walked through it. And she will not look back." Silence stretched between them. Samuel thought of all the times Glory had stayed late at the office, typing up his speeches, arranging his flights, making sure contracts were flawless. He had mistaken diligence for loyalty. But diligence, he now realized, could also be ambition in disguise. He clenched his fist around the cup of tea, cold and untouched. "And Gideon?" Samuel asked finally. Michael's lips tightened. Gideon enjoyed every moment. He sees her as an asset now. He knows her value, and he will use her to weaken you if he can. Samuel's jaw tightened. The rivalry with Gideon had always been sharp, but now it felt personal. Not because of business, but because Gideon had lured someone from Samuel's own circle. It felt like betrayal twice over. That night Samuel walked through his mansion with a heavy heart. He paused at the window that overlooked the city. Lagos glittered in the distance, its chaos muted by the thick glass. He thought about what he wanted from life. Wealth he had, power he had, but companionship rooted in truth still eluded him. Precious failed. Glory failed. Would Esther fail too? He almost feared to find out. But he knew he must. Without truth, even the grandest mansion felt like a cage. As he turned from the window, his gaze fell on the simple broom leaning against the wall near the kitchen. It belonged to Esther. For some reason, that sight steadied him. Tomorrow Michael will deliver her report. And Samuel's heart, tired but searching, would finally learn if any woman in his life saw him not as a wallet or a ladder, but as a man. The folder sat unopened on Samuel's desk for hours. He had asked Michael to bring it in the morning, but when Michael left, Samuel could not bring himself to touch it. For Precious, he had torn through the pages with morbid curiosity, half expecting the wasteful indulgence. For Glory, he had read each line with mounting tension, every word revealing the sharp sting of ambition. But with Esther, he hesitated. When he finally opened the folder, the first words made him stop. Michael had written in his precise handwriting, "Esther used less than 1% of the card." Samuel frowned. That line alone made no sense. Less than 1%? How could that be, when the card had no limit, when it could buy palaces and yachts and fleets of cars? He read on. On the first day, Esther had taken the card and walked to the neighborhood market, the same one she usually visited with her small envelope of wages. Michael's man followed discreetly, noting how she bought bags of rice, beans, gari, palm oil, vegetables, fish, and meat. But she did not return to the mansion with them. Instead, she went to Mama Peace's compound, a rundown cluster of rooms not far from her own home. Mama Peace had been unwell for months, her strength slowly fading. Esther paid for her medical prescriptions in cash, stocked her kitchen with food, and even hired 2 young boys from the street to fetch water for her, giving them crisp notes from the card account. She left nothing for herself. Not even a bottle of mineral water. On the second day, she visited a small orphanage tucked between 2 churches. Michael's man described the scene in detail. The children swarmed her as soon as she stepped into the yard, tugging at her wrapper, calling her Auntie Esther with squeals of delight. She spoke to the caretaker quietly, and then she returned to the market. With the card she bought cartons of noodles, milk, sugar, soap, and clothes. Later that afternoon, she arranged for a delivery of mattresses so the children would not have to sleep on the floor anymore. She never once introduced herself as working for Samuel. She said nothing of where the money came from. She simply gave and walked away. The third day broke Samuel's heart completely. Esther went into the city with the card, and Michael's man almost lost her in the crowd. She had gone to a part of Lagos that Samuel himself had not set foot in for decades. The slum sprawled endlessly, full of makeshift shacks, smoke from firewood, and the tired eyes of the forgotten. Esther carried plastic bags filled with bread, bottled water, and cooked food. She handed them out one by one, crouching to speak with the children, smiling gently at mothers with babies on their hips. Michael's man noted that she refused to be rushed, taking her time with each person, speaking words of encouragement as though she had all the time in the world. The card, limitless as it was, remained almost untouched. She could have emptied entire supermarkets, but instead she bought only what she could carry with her 2 hands. Samuel sat back in his chair, the folder trembling in his hands. His chest ached. Precious had seen the card as a mirror for her vanity. Glory had seen it as a weapon for her ambition. But Esther had seen it as an opportunity to relieve the suffering of others. She had thought nothing of herself. Samuel closed his eyes and let the silence of the mansion wash over him. He thought of Esther as she moved quietly through the house each day, sweeping, dusting, cooking, always polite, never asking for more than what was given. And yet, when placed before unimaginable wealth, she did not even consider what she could gain. She thought only of what she could give. It shattered him. That evening Samuel asked Michael to come to the mansion again. The lawyer arrived, briefcase in hand, his expression calm as always. Samuel poured them both glasses of water and sat across from his old friend. "Tell me," Samuel said quietly, "did you see her?" Michael adjusted his glasses. "I did. I wanted to be sure the report was accurate. I followed her myself on the 3rd day. Everything written there is true. She gave away almost everything she touched. Not for recognition, not for gain. She simply gave." Samuel pressed his hands to his face, exhaling slowly. "And she kept nothing for herself." "Nothing," Michael confirmed. "When she returned home, she looked the same as always. No new clothes, no new jewelry. She did not even use the card to fix her leaking roof. She only gave to others." Samuel lowered his hands and looked at his friend. do you know what that means? Michael nodded slowly. It means she is different. Samuel's throat tightened. It means I've been blind all these years. Surrounded by people who see me as money, as power, as an opportunity. And the one person who never asked for anything is the one who has the purest heart. Michael leaned back in his chair. The test has served its purpose. Now you must decide what to do with the truth. Samuel spent the night walking through his mansion. He passed Precious's dresses hanging in his wardrobe where she had left them after her last stay. He thought of her laughter as she ordered champagne, her obsession with parties and lights. And then he reached the small room in the servants' quarters where Esther lived. He stood outside the door for a long time, listening to the faint sound of her humming a hymn as she folded her clothes. It was a simple melody, full of peace. He felt his heart swell with an emotion he had not felt in years, hope. The following morning Samuel called Precious first. She answered cheerfully, already asking about their next trip abroad, but Samuel's voice was steady as stone. He told her it was over. She screamed, cursed, and hung up. He felt no regret. Then he called Glory into his office. She arrived with her polished smile, carrying her notepad as though ready for another meeting. But when Samuel handed her the letter of dismissal, her face froze. She tried to reason, to argue, to insist on her value, but Samuel remained firm. He told her he knew everything. She left with her pride intact, but her position was gone. And then, finally, Samuel asked Esther to join him in the garden. The morning sun painted the flowers in shades of gold. Esther came quietly, wiping her hands on her wrapper. She bowed slightly, waiting for instructions. Samuel studied her for a long moment before speaking. Esther, do you know what you did with the card? She looked at him, puzzled. I only tried to help where I could, sir. You had 3 days and limitless wealth, Samuel said softly. You could have bought anything in the world. Why did you choose to give? Esther lowered her gaze. Because others needed it more than I did. I have food, I have a roof, I have work. But Mama Peace is sick. The children at the orphanage are hungry. The people in the slums have nothing. How could I think of myself when they suffer? Her words pierced Samuel's heart like light through darkness. He stepped closer, his voice unsteady. Do you know what you've done, Esther? You've reminded me of what it means to be human. She lifted her eyes then, and for the first time he saw them clearly, gentle, strong, full of quiet faith. In that moment Samuel knew his life would never be the same. He did not see her as a maid anymore. He saw her as the one person who could anchor him to something real, something beyond money and ambition. Later that week, Samuel made his decisions known. He broke ties with Precious, who raged publicly but soon disappeared into another man's shadow. He let Glory go, knowing she would find her way into Gideon's circle, but no longer caring. And he invited Esther not only into his mansion but into his heart. Slowly, carefully, he courted her, not with diamonds or cars, but with honesty, patience, and respect. She hesitated at first, uncertain of the distance between their worlds, but Samuel was determined. Together they began to transform the mansion. The dining hall became a shelter for street children. The garden grew vegetables for the orphanage. The grand ballroom once used for parties became a space for community gatherings and charity events. Years later, Samuel stood at the same window overlooking Lagos, but he was no longer alone. Esther stood beside him, her hand resting in his. The city still glittered, chaotic and loud, but Samuel's heart was quiet. He had found what wealth alone could never buy. He had found love that asked for nothing and gave everything.